I got home earlier than planned from my business trip. The morning air had that crisp bite to it, with just a hint of rain lingering, like the sky hadn't made up its mind yet. I hadn't expected to be back so soon. Things wrapped up quicker than I figured they would. All I could think about was dropping my bags by the couch, kicking off my shoes, and finally enjoying some peace and quiet. But peace was the last thing waiting for me. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart skipped a beat. Parked right there, bold as ever, was a sleek Maserati. Not the kind of car you miss. I stopped cold. That car. I knew it. It was Roger's, Barbara's boss. Up until that moment, I'd never had much of an opinion about the guy. He always came off as polished and professional. Barbara spoke about him often, and maybe, thinking back, a little too fondly. But seeing his car there, shimmering like some smug trophy in front of my house, felt like a punch to the gut. I climbed out of my car and headed to the front door, trying to shake off the gnawing tightness in my chest. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe you just dropped by for a quick work thing. Barbara had been so tied up with her job lately, barely giving me any real details about how she spent her time. Still, as I got closer to the door, I felt something twist in my gut. The door wasn't shut all the way, it was cracked open. That wasn't normal. I pushed it gently, heart pounding in my ears. The second I stepped into the hallway, I caught the sound of voices. They were faint, muffled, but one of them was definitely Barbara. And that laugh, not her real one, but the phony kind she used when she was trying to sound carefree. I walked deeper into the house, and then I heard it, something that stopped me in my tracks. "Your scent's still on me," she said, voice low and sultry. My husband never noticed. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I couldn't believe it. My mind refused to process what I just heard. Was this actually happening? I edged forward, barely breathing. And there she was. Barbara stood in the living room with Roger. She had nothing on but a robe, and the way she was looking at him, it was a look I hadn't seen in years, not aimed at me anyway. A wave of emotions hit me all at once. Rage, heartbreak, confusion. But underneath it all was something I hadn't expected. Fear. The kind of fear that comes from realizing your whole world might be about to fall apart. I wanted to yell, to tear into them. But I was frozen. My body wouldn't move. Then Roger looked up. His eyes went wide for a second before he masked it with a crooked little smile. "Didn't know you were back already," he said casually, like he hadn't just been caught doing the unthinkable. I wanted to deck him right then and there. I wanted to scream at Barbara, demand answers. But I couldn't get a single word out. My legs felt like they turned to rubber. Barbara saw the look in my eyes, and her face flushed red. But she didn't move. She just turned to Roger, and he gave her a nod before walking out, cool as ever, like it was no big deal. The door clicked shut behind him. She didn't chase him, didn't try to explain. She just stood there, rubbing her forehead like she had a headache. "Well, this is awkward," she muttered, like it was some minor inconvenience. Then she looked at me, calm, way too calm, and said, "I guess you found out, huh?" The casualness in her voice made my skin crawl. It was like she was enjoying the moment, like she held all the cards. My chest was heaving, but I still couldn't find the words. My mind was racing with what she'd just admitted to. And she didn't even look sorry. "Barbara," I finally managed, my voice barely steady, cracked with disbelief and fury. "How long?" She gave a lazy shrug, like it didn't matter. "Does it really make a difference? You've never been what I needed. I told you that." Then she twisted the knife. "Roger is everything you're not. He makes me feel wanted. He makes me feel like I matter." Each word hit me like a blow. I'd done everything I could to be there for her, to be a good man. And now she was tossing all of it aside like it was meaningless. I could see the smirk on her face, as if my pain was just entertainment for her. But I wasn't going to break. Not here. Not in front of her. What Barbara didn't realize was that this moment, this betrayal, was a turning point for me too. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to raise my voice or fall apart. No, I was going to become the man she'd wished she'd never let go of. And that Maserati in my garage? That was just the beginning. Barbara stood there with her arms crossed, her expression cold, like I was some annoying distraction she couldn't wait to get rid of. For a second, I almost believed her, that maybe I wasn't the man I thought I was. That maybe she was right. I wanted to scream, to force the truth out of her. But the words wouldn't come. All I could do was stand there, staring at her, feeling the weight of betrayal settle deep in my chest. The woman I had loved, the one I had trusted with everything, had been living a lie, cheating on me with the man she called her boss. And just like that, she acted like none of it even mattered. Like tearing our life apart was some minor inconvenience. I stood there, fist clenched, barely able to breathe. Is this really happening? I muttered to myself, still trying to wrap my head around what I'd walked into. Barbara rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Steve, she said with that familiar irritation in her voice. You don't get it, do you? I stopped loving you a long time ago. I needed something else, someone who could give me what I really wanted. Not someone who's so damn predictable. And then she threw Roger's name out there again, like a dagger. Roger is everything you're not. Her words didn't just hurt, they burned. It felt like venom spreading through my chest. But underneath the anger bubbling up inside me was something deeper. Shame. Regret. The realization that I'd been blind for so long. Looking back, I'd seen the signs. The distance between us. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes. The long hours at work. The way she came home later and later, always looking distracted, like she had a million places she'd rather be. And me? I was too caught up in my own routines, too wrapped up in my job, to notice she was slipping away. I'm sorry, Steve, she said, but her voice was cold, sarcastic, like the words were just for show. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you were never really there for me. You were always too busy with your own life. I took a slow, deep breath, trying not to lose it. You didn't mean to hurt me? I said, my voice tight. You've been lying to me for who knows how long, and now you want to play innocent? For a second, her expression shifted, maybe guilt, maybe something else, but it vanished just as quickly. She turned away from me and wandered over to the kitchen like we were just having a casual chat. She picked up her phone and checked it like she had somewhere more important to be. I couldn't believe it. How could she act so unaffected? Everything we had built, the marriage, the home, the promises, it meant nothing to her. It was like I was just another item on her to-do list she'd finally crossed off. So what now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though every word felt like it scraped my throat. Do I just pack my stuff and disappear? Or are you going to find a way to blame me for all this too? Seems to be your specialty, pointing fingers. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood there, swirling the wine in her glass, avoiding my eyes. You don't understand, Steve, she said finally, her voice flat. This isn't about you. It never was. You were just filling space. I needed more. And now I found it. I felt like I was going to erupt, but I held back. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Who is he, Barbara? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Say it. Tell me who. She looked up slowly, that smug little grin back on her face. Roger, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He's been there for me in ways you never were. He gets me. He makes me feel wanted. And honestly, Steve, I don't want you to try to be him. You never could be. I stood there, frozen in place, my chest tightening. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about everything that had led up to this moment. She had fallen for a man who walked around like he owned her, like he had the right to take what wasn't his. And the worst part? He probably believed he could. I wanted to scream, to run after him, and make him pay. But I didn't. Instead, I stood still, letting her words settle into my bones. This wasn't just her doing. I had allowed this. I had become passive, a bystander in my own life. But that ends now. As I looked at her, really looked at her, I made a decision. This wasn't the end of my story. Not by a long shot. You want to know what I'm going to do? I said calmly, my voice low but firm. I'm going to show you what it really means to be an alpha. I'm going to become the man you never thought I could be. She laughed. A bitter, dismissive laugh. Oh, come on, Steve. Don't embarrass yourself with that macho crap. It's pathetic. I didn't even flinch. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about winning her back or proving anything to her. It was about proving something to myself. And maybe, to Roger, too. The next move was mine. The days that followed were a blur. My mind never stopped racing. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw her face, Barbara, the woman I had once trusted more than anything, now nothing more than a stranger. The betrayal crushed me. It clung to me like smoke, impossible to shake. But as the hours ticked by, something else began to stir. Something dark. Something determined. I had been weak for too long. Passive. Complacent. I'd let myself fade into the background of her story, becoming invisible in my own life. No more. Roger might think he's the top dog now. He might think he's already won. But he hasn't seen what I'm capable of. Not yet. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to rebuild myself stronger, sharper. The man she never thought I could be? That man was coming. I kept my distance from Barbara after that. The tension in the house was suffocating. Every time we crossed paths, there was nothing but silence. She wasn't sorry, not even close. If anything, she acted like I was the one losing my mind, like I was blowing everything out of proportion. Barbara just carried on, going about her day like nothing had happened, like our entire life hadn't been shattered into pieces. It was like I was invisible to her now, like the years we'd spent together had no weight at all. She didn't care. That much was clear. But me? I was done just standing around. I had already started planning. Quietly. Carefully. Every move, every word, every decision. I was calculating everything. The time for long talks and emotional outbursts was over. If she thought she could walk away from this marriage, from everything we built, without facing the consequences, then she didn't know me at all. I wasn't looking for revenge, not exactly. But I was going to show her what it felt like to lose control. Barbara had been playing games all along, smiling in my face while stabbing me in the back. I figured it was time I played too, but on my terms. And this time, the stakes were real. She needed to feel what I was feeling. She needed to understand that no amount of praise at work, no sleek Maserati, and certainly no affair with her smug boss could shield her from what was coming. I started small. First thing I did was get back in the gym. I'd let that part of my life slip, and I knew it. But this wasn't about impressing her anymore. It was about rebuilding me. I needed to feel strong again, grounded. I needed to reconnect with the version of myself that existed before all of this mess, before her lies had slowly hollowed me out. Working out became my new routine. I was in there almost every day, pushing myself harder each time. With every rep, I felt the fog lift a little more. I started to feel the shift, not just in my body, but in my mind. I was becoming sharper, more focused. I was shedding the man who had once ignored the signs, the man who let his marriage rot while clinging to hope. And as I grew stronger, another focus started to form in my mind. Roger. That arrogant bastard thought he could just stroll into my life, steal my wife, and walk away without a scratch. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't coming for him head-on. No, I was going to hit him where it hurt, quietly, surgically. I began digging into his business. I had some industry contacts, and it didn't take long to find out that his company was already skating on thin ice. There were rumors floating around, audits, accounting irregularities, whispers of financial trouble. Nothing solid yet, but enough to know there were cracks beneath his polished image. I didn't act on it, not yet. Timing was everything. The more I uncovered, the more I saw what Roger really was, a man who built his success on charm and shortcuts, not substance. Just like I used to be the invisible man in my own story, he was the kind of guy who relied on smoke and mirrors. And once you pull the curtain back on a man like that, there's usually not much left. Barbara didn't know any of this was happening. She still thought she had it all under control. But what she didn't realize was that I was done playing the victim. I wasn't going to take her back, but I wasn't going to let her walk away thinking she'd won, either. I let her believe I was still broken. Let her think I was still the same quiet man she'd walked all over. But every day I spent building myself up. Every minute I spent focusing on my own life was one step closer to taking control. Then, I started to notice it, small changes in her. She'd see me heading out for a run or coming back from the gym, and her eyes would linger just a second too long. There was suspicion there. Confusion, maybe. Like she could sense something was shifting, but couldn't quite figure out what. Oh, but she would. Eventually. She had no idea what I was becoming, and that was her biggest mistake. A few days after I uncovered those business rumors about Roger, Barbara's attitude started to shift again. But not in the way I'd hoped. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't reflecting. If anything, she doubled down on being cold. She started throwing little comments my way. Things about how exciting her work was, how much Roger understood her. Her phone would light up at strange hours, and she'd slink off into the other room, whispering like I didn't exist. And the worst part? She actually thought I didn't notice. She still believed I was the same guy who used to give her the benefit of the doubt. That guy was long gone. The truth was, I wasn't just changing physically. Mentally, emotionally, I was rebuilding. I started doing things for me. Stuff I had shelved because it didn't fit into her version of our life. I picked up hobbies I'd dropped, reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. And with each small step, it became clearer. I had lived in her shadow for far too long. Her needs, her career, her ego, they had always come first. But now I came first. One evening, she came home late again. Walked through the door without even looking at me. No hello, no eye contact. Just breezed right past me like I was furniture. Straight to the bedroom. Same routine. And I already knew what was next. She had completely shut herself off from me, locked herself in her own little world, pretending everything was fine, like the betrayal, the lies, the damage didn't even exist. But I wasn't going to let her keep doing that. Not anymore. I had a plan, and that night, I was ready to set it in motion. I got up from the couch and walked into the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, eyes glued to her phone, completely unaware that I was standing right there in the doorway. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at her, letting the silence stretch out, letting her feel it. Eventually, she looked up slowly, like I was some minor annoyance. "What?" she said, her voice cold and clipped, like I'd interrupted something important. She had no clue what was coming. Still silent, I walked over to the dresser, opened the drawer, and pulled out an old shirt I hadn't worn in years, one she used to love on me, back when we were still us. I tossed it onto the bed in front of her. Her eyes flicked to the shirt, confused for a second, but then her face twisted into that same bitter scowl I'd seen too many times. "What's this supposed to mean, Steve?" she snapped, brushing the shirt aside like it was nothing. I looked her straight in the eye. "Do you even remember who I am, Barbara?" I asked, calm but steady. "Do you remember the man you married?" She didn't answer right away, just looked away, frustrated. "I don't have time for this," she muttered. "You're being childish." But this time, she didn't get to control the story. "No," I said. "What's childish is lying to someone who's done nothing but try to love you. What's childish is pretending nothing's wrong when you've been sleeping with your boss." Her body tensed. Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw it fear. She tried to hold her composure, but her voice cracked just a little. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, stepping closer. "You and Roger. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and I've been playing the fool. But not anymore." She stood up fast, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. You never understood," she shouted. "I don't need you anymore, Steve. I've moved on. Roger, he's everything you're not. Everything I've needed." Those words, they hit like a slap to the face. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. I took a deep breath and gave her a small smile. Not the kind that says I'm happy, but the kind that says I'm done. Done being walked on. Done being lied to. Done being hers. "I'm glad you found what you were looking for," I said quietly. "Because I'm not sticking around to watch it crash and burn. I'm done, Barbara. Done with your lies. Done with the games." For once, she had nothing to say. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, but nothing came out. Her eyes widened slightly, like the realization had finally hit her. "I'm leaving," I said, "and I'm not coming back." And then I turned and walked out of the room. No begging. No tears. No dramatic goodbye. Just gone. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving behind the version of myself who thought love could fix everything. The man who let her walk all over him. That man was gone. What came next felt like a strange kind of freedom. Barbara never saw it coming. She figured she could keep me around as some sad little background character while she chased her office fling. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. I'd already started putting the pieces of myself back together. Piece by piece, day by day. It was like waking up after a long sleep. And the change wasn't just on the outside. Yeah, I was hitting the gym harder than ever. Yeah, I looked stronger. But what really mattered? I felt clear again. Sharp. Like I had finally come back to life. The lies she told, the signs I missed, it all made sense now. But none of it mattered anymore. I was already moving forward. I filled my days with purpose. Projects I'd abandoned got my attention again. I reconnected with friends I hadn't talked to in years. I picked up hobbies she'd rolled her eyes at. And every time I did something for me, I felt that old weight lift just a little more. I didn't need Barbara. I didn't need anyone who could betray me for a cheap thrill. But there was still one thing I hadn't addressed. Roger. He thought he could swoop into my life, take what he wanted, and walk away clean. He was wrong. This wasn't about jealousy. This wasn't even about Barbara anymore. This was about principle. About making sure he understood that actions have consequences, and that I wasn't the kind of man you could step on and forget. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to do something reckless. I was going to handle this the same way I'd been rebuilding myself, deliberately, strategically. I didn't want revenge, not in the way most people think of it. What I wanted was clarity. What I wanted was justice. I wasn't planning some big confrontation. No dramatic showdown. No screaming match in a parking lot. That would have been too easy, too loud. No, I learned a thing or two from watching Barbara play her little games. It wasn't about yelling or slamming doors. It was about precision. It was about control. It was about actions. Quiet, calculated actions that left a mark. So I started gathering information, real, solid intel on Roger's business dealings. I didn't want to completely destroy him. That would have been too obvious, and honestly, I wasn't interested in stooping to that level. I wanted something more subtle, something that would sting. I made a few calls. I had friends in the industry, people who owed me favors, people who liked me a hell of a lot more than they liked him. And they dug. Not deep, just enough. Just enough to stir things up, to bring a little heat his way when the timing was right. Meanwhile, Barbara kept up her charade like nothing was wrong. She was still seeing Roger, still sneaking around, still pretending she held the cards. The late-night phone calls, the whispers, the nervous glances, they were all there. And I saw it all. But the difference now? I didn't care. Not really. Every time she lied to my face or looked at me like I was invisible, it only reminded me how wrong she was about me. She thought I was still the man she could control, the one who'd cave at the first sign of conflict. But I wasn't him anymore. I had changed. One evening, she tried playing her usual part again. Walked into the house wearing that forced smile, acting like the affair was just some minor detail we could both pretend didn't happen. She wanted to play both sides, to have Roger and keep me around like a backup plan. But I could read her like a book. The way she moved, the way she spoke, it was all performance. She was nervous. She didn't know what I was up to, and that made her uneasy. She sat down and tried to make small talk, her voice casual but stiff. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to sound normal. But there was that slight edge in her voice, that uncertainty. She was waiting for me to blow up or crack, the way I used to. I didn't give her the satisfaction. "It was good," I said calmly. "Staying busy." I didn't tell her about the calls I'd made, the meetings, the groundwork I was laying. That wasn't for her to know. Not yet. She glanced around the room, a little fidgety, avoiding my eyes. The signs were all there. She wasn't used to this version of me, steady, unreadable. Then she hit me with it. "Are you seeing someone else?" It was casual on the surface, but there was tension underneath, like she was testing me, fishing for some clue that she still had a hold on me. I met her gaze without flinching. "No," I said. "Haven't had the time." I watched her closely. She tried to hide it, but there was a flicker, just a flash, of disappointment. Or maybe fear. She recovered quickly, her voice going cold again. "Oh, well, that's good." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence did the work for me. That moment, right there, that was the shift. The control had flipped. She didn't know what to do with me now. For the first time in years, she was the one unsure of where things stood. And it hit me, something I hadn't felt before. I didn't care about getting her back. I didn't need her to want me again. This wasn't about our marriage. It was about me. About taking back my own damn life. I had become someone she couldn't manipulate. Someone who didn't need her permission to feel whole. And that was enough. As for Roger and her lies, that would all take care of itself. Over the next few days, her behavior got weirder. She kept trying to act like everything was normal, but I could see the cracks. She'd glance at me with that nervous edge in her eyes, trying to predict what I'd say or do next. But I didn't give her anything. I didn't argue. I didn't snap. I just existed, quiet, calm, indifferent. It drove her nuts. She tried to poke at me with questions. "Are you still upset?" she asked once, hoping I'd fall into one of her emotional traps. But I didn't even blink. "No," I said. "I'm not upset." And that blank stare? That lack of reaction? It unraveled her. She couldn't stand the fact that she no longer had the power to get under my skin. That her guilt trips, her manipulations, they didn't land anymore. I had taken control. And now, she was the one unsure of her footing. The dynamic had shifted, and it was eating her alive. But there was still one piece left on the board. One final move. Roger. I had enough on him now. The guy wasn't as bulletproof as he liked to pretend. His success, his flash, his precious Maserati, it was all balanced on shaky foundations. Thanks to a few well-placed calls and some industry whispers, I learned the truth. His company was in trouble. There were talks of audits, whispers of shady practices, financial reports that didn't quite add up. And that's where I came in. I didn't want to ruin his life. I just wanted him to understand one thing. He wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't going to show up at his office and throw a punch. I wasn't going to scream in his face. I was going to let him feel the walls closing in, slowly and methodically, just like I had. No, confronting him directly wouldn't have been satisfying enough. That would have been too clean, too easy. I wanted Roger to feel it, the slow, creeping consequences of his actions. The way Barbara had made me feel for so long, powerless, betrayed, unsure of my own worth. So I made a few more calls, planted the right doubts with the right people, dropped just enough truth to make the cracks in Roger's empire start to show. And before long, I saw it start to happen. His business, his precious kingdom, was being looked at closely. Audits, financial flags, people whispering behind closed doors. The kind of scrutiny that doesn't just go away with a smile and a handshake. He didn't know it yet, but the clock was ticking. His time at the top was almost up. Barbara, though, she stayed in the dark, still pretending like the world was just how she wanted it, still walking around with that fake sense of control, dropping her little comments about how amazing Roger was, how different he was compared to me. Like she was trying to convince herself. But it didn't land anymore. It all sounded hollow. See, people like Barbara, and Roger too, they walk through life thinking they can have it all. That they can lie, cheat, and manipulate without anything ever coming back around. But that's not how life works. Not forever. Eventually, the truth shows up. And when it started to show up for Roger, Barbara got caught right in the middle of it. Her smugness started to fade. That look she used to give me, the one that said I was a failure, that I wasn't enough, it was gone. Replaced by something else. Something unfamiliar. Worry. You could hear it in her voice, too. The way her confidence started to slip. The way she stumbled over her words when she talked about Roger like she wasn't so sure anymore. One evening, I decided to nudge it a little. How's Roger doing these days? I asked casually as she walked into the kitchen, pretending like it was just idle conversation. Her eyes widened, just for a moment. Then she tried to play it cool. He's fine, she said quickly. Actually, he's doing great. Really? I replied, raising an eyebrow. I heard there were some changes going on. Something about audits? Mismanagement? That kind of thing doesn't usually stay hidden for long. She froze for just a second. I saw it in her eyes, that flicker of panic. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the shift again. The roles had reversed. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice wasn't steady. She couldn't meet my eyes. I took a step closer. Oh, come on, Barbara. You don't have to lie to me. I know exactly what's going on. I let that sink in. Let her hear the certainty in my voice. Roger's in trouble. Big trouble. His little empire's starting to crumble. The real question is, where does that leave you? She opened her mouth like she wanted to deny it, but nothing came out. For the first time, she was cornered. And the fear I saw in her eyes? That was the same fear I'd lived with when I first found out about her betrayal. Her silence said everything I needed to hear. Maybe it's time to rethink who you're really depending on, I said quietly, then turned and walked out of the room. She didn't follow, didn't say a word. And just like that, the power shifted again. Roger wasn't the untouchable man he thought he was. He was just another guy caught in a mess of his own making. And Barbara? She was starting to feel the consequences of the life she'd chosen. But for me, this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It wasn't about punishing them. This was about freedom. About reclaiming control over my life, my worth, and never handing it over to someone else again. The days that followed brought a quiet satisfaction I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about what was happening on the outside. It was internal, like something had realigned inside me. The web of lies they built, the smoke and mirrors, they were unraveling. And I was finally standing outside of it, untouched. What I hadn't expected was how fast the fallout spread. Barbara started changing. She wasn't the confident, untouchable woman she had tried so hard to be. That mask of superiority, the one she wore so comfortably when she was comparing me to Roger, it was slipping. Now, she was nervous, unsteady, like she didn't know what version of me she'd see each day. She walked on eggshells around me, overthinking every word, backtracking mid-sentence. The more unstable Roger's situation became, the more her confidence in him and herself started to crack. She tried to act like she still believed in him, talked about how he just needed some time, that everything would work itself out. But I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe it anymore. One night, she came home from work looking different, drained, tense, off balance. And for once, she didn't even try to fake it. No forced smile. No weak attempt at small talk. Just silence. And I knew. She was finally starting to feel the weight of her choices. She walked in without a word, her expression heavy, her body sagging under the weight of something she didn't want to admit. She dropped onto the couch like the air had been knocked out of her and ran her hands through her hair in frustration. I stayed silent. By now, I'd learned that silence could be louder than any argument. more unsettling than any accusation. She could feel the shift. She knew something was wrong, but for once, she didn't know what to do about it. I listened to her breathing short, ragged, as she tried to pull herself together. But I wasn't going to offer her comfort. Not anymore. Then, after what felt like a full minute of tension hanging in the air, she finally spoke. Her voice wasn't cold or arrogant this time. It was laced with something new, something raw. "Why did you do it?" she asked, eyes locking onto mine. Searching. Almost pleading. "Why, Steve?" I leaned against the doorframe, calm. "Do what?" I asked, my voice easy, casual, like I had no clue what she meant. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't act like you don't know. You've been digging around in Roger's business. You've been messing with him. You've done something." "Why, Steve? Why would you do that?" There it was. Panic. Not just in her voice, but in her eyes. The truth was starting to close in, and she didn't know how to stop it. Everything she had thrown herself into, Roger, their affair, her escape plan, it was slipping through her fingers, and for the first time, she looked vulnerable. "For years," I said, voice low, steady, "you thought you could just walk away from everything we built. That you could cheat, lie, and pretend none of it mattered. That there'd be no consequences. You were wrong, Barbara. So wrong." She flinched. And I didn't care. She had underestimated me. Thought I'd crumble. Thought I'd be just another casualty in her self-centered story. But I'd taken back the narrative. I'd taken back me. "I don't care about Roger," I continued. "Never did. This isn't about him. It's about you. About what you did. You thought you could take whatever you wanted and leave behind whatever mess you made. But life doesn't work like that." She didn't respond, just stared at me with wide eyes, a storm of emotions behind them. Fear. Regret. Confusion. Maybe all of the above. Whatever it was, she couldn't hide it anymore. The woman who once controlled every conversation, every moment, every emotional beat, was now at the mercy of the man she tried to destroy. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice softening just a bit, but the conviction in it stayed strong. "And you tossed it aside. For what? For someone who didn't even care about you the way I did. And now you're left to live with the fallout." She jumped up like she'd been burned, anger flashing across her face. "I don't need this," she snapped. "I don't need you telling me how to live my life." I looked at her, a touch of sadness bleeding into my voice. "You never needed me, Barbara. You needed control. Someone to prop you up. Someone to make you feel better about yourself. But now that control's gone, and what's left?" She didn't have an answer. For the first time, she looked at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Because truth was, she didn't. This version of me wasn't built for her approval. She had created this moment. She had laid the foundation, brick by brick, with every lie, every betrayal. Now, she was watching it all collapse. "You know," I said after a beat, my tone shifting slightly, "I never planned any of this. I didn't set out to hurt you. But I couldn't keep being the man you thought I was. I've changed, Barbara. And you don't get to have me back just because things aren't going your way." She stared at me, waiting. For what? I don't know. An apology? A crack in my voice? A hint of weakness? I didn't give her anything. Because I didn't owe her a damn thing. "I'm leaving," she finally said, her voice tight with emotion. "I can't do this anymore." I didn't stop her. I didn't ask her to sit down or talk it out. I just nodded and watched as she grabbed her things. And then she walked out the door. And as I stood there, watching her disappear down the driveway, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a version of me I no longer needed. This was a new beginning. For the first time in years, the house was silent. No more footsteps pacing the hall, no more tension floating in the air, no more forced laughter. Just quiet. But it wasn't loneliness I felt. It was freedom. Barbara was gone. And so was the chaos, the manipulation, the endless weight of trying to make something broken work. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt whole. It was like the air had finally cleared, like I could breathe again without choking on the past. She left in a hurry, no dramatic exits, no screaming or slammed doors. And honestly, that silence between us? It said everything words couldn't. No apology was needed. No forgiveness offered. The truth had already been laid bare. We both knew where we stood now. But I'll be honest, it wasn't instant relief. In those first few hours after she walked out, the house felt different. Off. I looked around at what had once been our shared space, a place I used to call home. It used to feel familiar, warm, even safe at times. Now, it was just four walls and a roof. No more yelling. No more games. No more deception. Just silence. But it wasn't peaceful silence. Not yet. It was eerie, like waking up from a long nightmare and not being sure what was real anymore. I sat down on the couch, gripping the armrest like I needed something to anchor me. I wasn't just sitting in my house. I was sitting with everything that had happened, letting it all settle. Because this wasn't just about Barbara or Roger. This was about me. For years, I'd lived in someone else's story, trapped in her expectations, shaped by her moods. I'd let myself fade into the background, let others tell me who I was and what I was worth. But sitting there, alone in that silence, something hit me like a wave. I'd been handed something most people don't recognize until it's too late, a second chance. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was, to decide what I wanted, not what someone else expected of me. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need her. I didn't need anyone who looked at me like I was disposable. This wasn't about just surviving her betrayal. This was about thriving in spite of it. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of quiet growth. I focused on everything I'd neglected, my work, my friendships, my health. I threw myself back into my career with a new sense of purpose, setting goals I'd shelved long ago. I reached out to old friends, people I hadn't seen in years because I was always too busy playing Barbara's emotional caretaker. And I kept hitting the gym. Every run, every rep, every drop of sweat. It wasn't just about getting fit. It was about reminding myself that I was in control again. But more than that, something deeper had shifted inside me. I wasn't just changing on the surface. I was transforming from the inside out. Yeah, I'd been broken. But now, I was stronger because of it. I was learning something new, how to be selfish in a way I never had before. Not the destructive kind of selfish, but the kind where you finally put yourself first. The kind where you stop shrinking to make someone else feel bigger. I was learning how to be the man I wanted to be. Not the one Barbara had tried to mold. Not the one I thought I needed to become to be loved. Just me. One afternoon, I found myself sitting alone at a cafe, out on the patio, just sipping a cup of coffee. The world around me felt still for the first time in forever. People walked by, sunlight filtered through the trees, and there was this moment, brief but real, where I felt complete peace. And I realized something right then. I hadn't felt that way in years. Thoughts of Barbara and Roger barely registered. They were like faded characters in a book I no longer needed to read. They were part of my past, but not my future. I had moved on. And once I truly accepted that, the future started to open up. I started making plans again. Things I had once pushed aside or convinced myself weren't practical. I thought about traveling, seeing the world on my own terms. Maybe, eventually, finding someone who would see me for who I really was, not for what I could give them or how well I fit into their life. I wasn't in a rush to fall in love again. But the idea didn't scare me anymore. That was progress. Because I'd finally learned to love myself again. And that was the most important thing I could have taken from all this. Then, one night, a few weeks after she left, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, just staring. The man looking back at me. I didn't recognize him at first. He looked stronger, calmer, different. But the longer I looked, the more I realized he wasn't new. He was just me, the real me, the version of myself I had buried under years of self-doubt and emotional fatigue. He had always been there, just waiting for a reason to come back to life. I had gone through hell, faced every dark thought, every hard truth. And I came out the other side still standing. No, stronger than ever. I knew life would still throw punches. There'd be more heartbreak, more lessons. That's just the deal. But now, I was ready for it. Because I'd learned the one thing that matters most. I could survive anything. And as I turned off the bathroom light and walked away from that mirror, I smiled. I was finally, truly free.